Caffeinated bacon? Baconated grapefruit? Admiral Crunch?
Futurama is filled with foods and beverages that I can't help but be a little bit curious about. Do all Glagnar's human rinds taste the same, or does it vary from person to person like Soleil and Cola?
I've got a big thirst for human blood!
You know, maybe that's a bad example because I'm interested in something that I'll never get a chance to try. Slurm. See, a lot of these other futuristic foodstuffs can be compared to present-day equivalents for rough approximations. I mean, I've had Captain Crunch, so yeah, I know what blood tastes like.
Cut my mouth up something bad.
But where do you even start with Slurm? I've always thought of it as some sort of futuristic alien Mountain Dew, but that's because I've definitely done the do, by which I mean back in high school I used to hit up my local Cumbies for a daily 44-ounce fountain mug that I bought so I only had to pay like 50 cents per refill.
Right up until my third heart attack.
But this is actually pretty unlikely because there's already a Futurama version of the Dew in the form of Mountain Goo. This comparison basically boils down to the two soft drinks being similar in color. Mountain Dew is kinda green, it's a greenish yellow. I couldn't find an official source on the matter, but the Mountain Dew fandom wiki, which is something that exists, described the beverage as a yellowish green. Regardless of the order you say the colors, the yellow is certainly noticeable in Mountain Dew, while Slurm is distinctly green. But if you're an old head, you might remember another citrus soda that was green back in the late 90s. Released in 1997 and canceled in 2003, then revived briefly in 2014, and again in 2015, and again in 2018, Surge bears an ironic resemblance to the show itself.
It's not ironic, it's just coincidental.
Coincidence or not, it's certainly interesting when you consider the similarities in the two sodas' names and logos, and that Surge would have been in the news at the right time for parody. There was a fairly loud pushback on Surge, and it got banned from several schools. That might feel like a false memory when you consider the library of energy drinks available in a tall boy can today, but to be fair, there are plenty of school bans and news articles regarding modern energy drinks. There's just no monoculture anymore, so it's not as loud if you aren't a parent or an overcaffeinated child. But it's also less novel now. It's not like 4 Kids with a Z was written on the side of a Surge can, but this is a green, sugary soda launched in the 90s, which feels like the peak of the Nickelodeon slime era. Admittedly, this might be because that's when I was a kid.
I keep telling you, we didn't grow up together.
Because Nick's been sliming people since 1979, but the 90s are when we really got into it. Gack, Floam, Goose, we ate that shit up.
I can't stop eating this delicious ooze.
Nickelodeon wasn't the only one either. This is the same decade that gave us Ivan Ooze, The Secret of the Ooze, and Flubber. Marketing to kids in the 90s involved a lot of slime, and a lot of it was green. And if Surge doesn't fall into that bucket, it certainly lands right next to it. So while it wasn't explicitly for kids, a grown man drinking Surge in 1999 might have been a bit of a man-child.
No, I'm doesn't.
It's a great way to add a layer of immaturity to Fry with a satirical take on what could be seen as the future of soda. That is, assuming Surge is the actual inspiration for Slurm. And given the similarities in color, logo, and overall branding,
Whammy wham wham wazzle! Let's party!
This is probably the most reasonable answer. But I consider myself an unreasonable man. So obviously this is completely unacceptable. Because that whole in-your-face attitude isn't exactly the norm for the brand. Most of the time, Slurm is just part of the background. Their marketing isn't very loud, but it is very everywhere.
Only on TV and radio, and in magazines, and movies, and at ball games, and on buses, and milk cartons, and t-shirts, and bananas, and written on the sky.
Even when you're sponsoring an event to promote a competing beverage like walrus juice.
Ride the walrus.
Fishy Joe's might be running the event, but Slurm is hosting the entire concert series at Madison Cube Garden because that's the scale of the Slurm brand. It's just hard for me to imagine a soda like Surge, which only lasted 6 years due to general disinterest, rising to the prominence of Slurm, which might as well be the Coca-Cola of sodas. Does that mean that Slurm tastes like Coke? Not necessarily, but there is a Coca-Cola sized hole in the soda market in the future. Because the Coke factory still exists in Futurama, it's just lost at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. And the recipe must have been kept in Atlanta too, because the product other factories are producing has been reduced to a ship engine fluid.
We're okay on Coke syrup.
It's possible that the syrup Leela is referring to is part of a soda fountain built into the Planet Express ship, but this is incredibly unlikely because we've never seen a soda machine until the professor gets Bev and everyone just flips out.
You undersold it, Professor.
That just doesn't look like a workplace that already has a soda fountain on board their delivery vehicle. Whatever that Coke syrup is doing, they aren't drinking it. No one is. We don't see it anywhere. Bev, of course, doesn't carry Coke. In fact, her selection of colas in general is very limited. It appears to be Dr. Jitter, assuming that's similar to Dr. Pepper, and that's it. Though, to be fair, I don't know what fresh squeezed walrus tastes like, but I doubt it's cola. If we're assuming Slurm is citrusy because of the green color, Bev has 4 citrus flavored sodas, 1 cola and 1, walrus flavored. You know, I'm just going to call that other. I'm also going to broaden citrus to be fruit flavored so that we can look at 3 categories of soda: cola, fruit-based, and walrus other. I bring this up because cola is very popular, regardless of the brand. According to this graph from Grandview Research that I don't have the details on because I wasn't willing to give them my phone number, cola flavor accounted for well over half of the entire global soda market in 2024. Fruit-based soda appears to be a little over a quarter of the market, and the rest, of course,
Ride the walrus.
if Slurm is fruit-based and Coke doesn't exist, there's a huge power vacuum in the cola space, and it's not like Pepsi is gonna fill it. I'm sorry, but Pepsi is made to be the other option. That's why it's blue. We all know this, red stuff is the mainstream. Mario, McDonald's, Lego, and blue stuff like Sonic the Hedgehog, Burger King, and Mega Bloks exists so people like me can feel like we're cool because we're not in the mainstream. We're next to it, in a different color but basically the same size stream. Except for Mega Bloks, which is ironically a stagnant puddle.
It's not ironic, it's just me.
All options coming down to red versus blue aside, what I'm saying is people might drink Coke because it's everywhere, yes, of course. But they also drink it because it's fucking good. It's the "is Pepsi okay" joke that is tired and I don't want to make. So instead of a joke, let's keep looking at market research data. Now, I couldn't find a data set that was directly comparable to the 2024 global soda market because, again, not giving my info to a market research company that probably already has it anyway.
I call keep offsies. No callsies!
But according to the Wall Street Journal Beverage Digest, Coke consistently owns nearly 20% of the 12-pack soda can market. To be clear, that's not Coke the company. That's the specific soda flavor of Coca-Cola Classic. Now, second place is Pepsi, of course, all the way down at 8.3%, where it's tied with Dr. Pepper. Look, I'm not a data scientist, which is fine because I don't respect them.
You've got a degree in baloney.
And you don't have to be to see an insane outlier in what is otherwise a compact dataset.
Fire direct marketing algorithm.
Surely a lot of it comes down to advertising, of course, but if that's all that was going on, you'd expect Diet Coke to experience a similar boost. It obviously wouldn't be to the same degree, but if Coke could just advertise their way into doubling Pepsi's sales, you'd expect Diet Coke higher than 5th. It'd probably be 2nd. And I know, people like how Coke tastes isn't exactly an observation, but what I'm saying is if Coke suddenly disappeared, there isn't a front runner in this group that would double in sales. Because even an imitation propped up in its place like New Coke didn't work.
We'll market it as New Slurm.
Now I don't have inconvenient charts that I can't fully access about Slurm's market value, but if the marketing of the drink is any indicator, it's closer to Coke than the rest of the pack. But this Coca-Cola comparison goes further than an abundance of billboards in the background. New Slurm isn't the only time the beverage has directly referenced Coke.
Slurm Zero!
Zero is obviously a common food marketing word that doesn't necessarily reference Coke Zero. Is what I would say if the can wasn't red, black, and white, like Coke Zero. Then, there's the final Slurm advert oddity, seen in a brief short film about Professor Farnsworth's achievements.
What a pleasure it is to see my lifetime of accomplishment summed up in a 3-minute film.
This old billboard advertises Slurm as a medicinal tonic. Now, if you're an old head and were alive in the 90s, you might remember when Coca-Cola was marketed as the ideal brain tonic. If you don't remember, that's because I'm talking about the 1890s. But that is how Coke was marketed, though that might have been back when it had cocaine in it.
It's highly addictive.
Does Slurm have cocaine in it? Or some equivalent alien compound that would make you glow if you OD instead of, well, you know, dying? That actually might explain Slurm's market share. Not cocaine, there's no evidence of that, but the addictiveness might be why it's so popular, which means it could probably take Coke's place without tasting like it, or like cola at all. So let's take a step back and talk about what we actually know about Slurm beyond the marketing face they put forward. Unfortunately, there's not a lot to go off of, because the tour of
Slurm's centralized industrial fabrication unit
is just more marketing. It's a farce, of course, but if the lies were too far from the actual taste of Slurm, that may arouse suspicion. Coke isn't going to tell you their whole recipe, but if they said it contains a significant amount of walrus, you might start to doubt the whole thing. Problem is, even if it was trustworthy, the Slurm tour is vague on the details. The only piece of information we get beyond spring water as an ingredient is wumpus berries, a made-up thing from planet Wormulon, I'm assuming. Which is a shame, because despite the fact that they're presented as a red herring, I think they might actually have a role in the production of Slurm. Now, I don't know for sure that the Slurm Queen is eating wumpus berries here, but if you're trying to maximize your Grunkalunka workforce,
They think they have a good union, but they don't. They're basically slaves.
having them prepare the Queen's food during the ruse is an efficient use of their time. Whether or not they're wumpus berries, the Queen is shoveling some sort of purple berry food into her maw at a pace that suggests it's a necessary part of producing Slurm. Which, yes, it did take me this far into the video to actually acknowledge Slurm is some sort of excreted goo from a gigantic space worm.
That's the only ingredient of Slurm.
But this actually gives us something to go off of, a better comparison than just guessing it's Coke because there's a lot of billboards.
Honey comes from a bee's behind.
Honey isn't a drink, but it is an incredibly popular food that bugs produce. It's pretty much the only example of this, though, because I'm not talking about actually eating the bug itself, like insect-based delicacies or bug protein products, or when you're eating processed food and there's that allowable percentage of bug matter in the mix.
You guys like swarms of things, right?
No, I'm talking about when we eat something insects produce. It's basically honey and maybe figs. I had trouble figuring out if figs were just a byproduct or if they actually contain the insect itself too. From what I could tell, fig trees need fig wasps to produce fig fruits. The wasps pollinate the flower that bears fruit when it lays its eggs and dies immediately. And what I can't tell is if the body of the female wasp stays in the fruit. Because, look, I'll be honest, I stopped
Sponging for information.
here. I'm a pretty curious guy, but I'm already never touching another fig dune, because that wasn't the wildest thing I learned about wasps that I never wanted to learn about in the first place. Content warning for just
I didn't want to know.
female fig wasps are born pregnant, which, yes, means a mature male wasp impregnates the female larva. Anyway, I don't know how to wrap my human sensibilities around that cursed knowledge, so let's never speak of figs ever again and focus on honey. That's just bee barf, which in a vacuum is gross, but compared to the thing that I'm never talking about again, it's whatever. The larger point here is honey and Slurm are both a gooey, sugary substance produced by an insect. Which is important. We don't steal food from any other bugs, even ones that make honeys, presumably because it doesn't taste great. So what is actually going on with honey that makes it so good? I wanted to know more, and I'm not a coward. Besides, I already learned that shit about wasps I shouldn't know, so what's the worst that could happen? So I typed honey.com into my internet browser, even though it's probably not the honey I'm looking for.
You sure you don't need a little honey, handsome?
Surprisingly, honey.com is unironically the domain of the National Honey Board. But it is just a bunch of useless marketing fluff. I want to know what's actually going on in the honey making process. What the bees are up to, not the humans taking the honey.
Throw off the chains of human oppression!
So I checked out Wikipedia more because I will use a suicide booth before I use ChatGPT. There's a bunch of stuff about sugars and enzymes, which is part of the taste, I'm sure, but is also part of the honey process across the board. All bees, and even some wasps, not those ones, produce honey. But we don't use every kind of honey on the scale we consume honeybee honey specifically. Some species, like bumblebees, don't produce a stockpile to collect from, but there are other stingless bees that do produce enough honey that can be and is sometimes farmed. This is the difference I wanted to look at, because the difference between honeybee honey and others is on a slurm scale.
This is no ordinary honey.
Stingless bee honey has a water content range from 25% to 35%, while honeybee honey is down at 15.5 to 18%. That difference is the reason honeybee honey is so sweet, energy dense, and stores so well. That's basically the reason we've been collecting honey as a species for like 8,000 years based on cave paintings. So what are honeybees doing that makes their honey so damn tasty? They're keeping it warmer. They use their unnaturally high body heat to evaporate more water from stored honey to regulate the temperature of the hive. Then once the water content of the honey reaches the appropriate level, they seal it off with wax. Obviously the slurm process is different. There isn't a worm hive that needs temperature regulation, but the temperature of slurm is regulated nonetheless.
Still warm.
Whether they're wumpus berries or not, the queen is eating some sort of fruit to fuel the production of slurm. Fruits have a lot of natural sugars in them, but like a lot of stuff, fruits contain a lot of water. A watermelon is like 90% water, which feels obvious, but the percentage is still in the low 80s for something like blueberries, which is closer to what we might be looking at here. I'm not saying that slurm has a water content closer to honey than fruit. It's a drink, and the water content is likely higher than 90%. But I think it's interesting that the water content does appear to be something the queen can control.
If you can resist this concentrated super slurm.
If the queen is able to alter the concentration of slurm she produces, the only conceivable way for her to do this is to have control over the substance's water content. Any other change would be an alteration, not a concentration. This is also supported by the increased viscosity, seeing as Fry is fed the goo via spoon. So it's possible we're looking at a process that is vaguely similar to honey production in that some sort of bug-like creature is using digestion to extract sugars and water from a natural source to produce a sweet substance that humans like to consume on a large scale. Meaning it's possible slurm tastes more like a honey soda. Because there's another big connection between bees and the worms from planet Wormulon.
Hey, what's this goop?
Royal jelly.
Now, if you're like me, Futurama may have taught you that
Bees make honey and jelly?
which is okay, because it turns out it's true. When a beehive is without a queen, royal jelly is fed to eggs to produce a new one. On planet Wormulon, they don't call it jelly, but they do produce a royal substance.
You will be submerged in royal slurm, which in a matter of minutes will transform you into a slurm queen like myself.
Both royal jelly and royal slurm are needed if the colony is making a new queen. But fuck bees, because we actually have to talk about how crazy this bubbling brew of purple goo is. They have this stuff ready to go in a place they call
The torture cave!
the crane they strap Leela into is built into the factory. The vat is built into the floor. It appears to be something they've used before. Guillermo certainly knows how to use the machine. He's ready to operate it. His only hesitation is because
She's a commoner. Her slurm will taste foul.
I feel like there's only one conclusion to draw from the existence of this apparatus and Guillermo's reaction to its use. They're typically using this torture cave to capture and turn members of various monarchies into slurm queens. While kidnapping royalty is pretty fucking based as it is, it also makes sense when you consider slurm's market share. It is way too big for a single slug to keep up.
I'm so tired, so very tired.
We can calculate the time it takes for a single slurm queen to produce 1 can of slurm by counting the frames between fillings. We see a total of 10 start to finish can fillings that we can time out. There's a tail end and a start of a few more, but we can't get proper timings on those, which is fine because 10 is a nice round number and it's easy to work with. The intervals are pretty consistent too, usually in the mid to low 20s, with a major outlier during the close-up scene of 14 frames. This creates an average of 1 slurm can every 22.1 frames, which is not a nice round number. Now, your frames per second is going to vary from medium to medium, especially when you're dealing with animation. But this episode was made for broadcast television, so for simplicity's sake, we're going to call it 30 frames per second, which is basically correct, though
Philo Farnsworth, inventor of television,
would tell you it's a bit more complicated than that. Unfortunately, this is going to get complicated enough because one slurm can every 22/30ths of a second is cumbersome math. That's 15 cans every 11 seconds, which translates to 900 cans every 11 minutes, 5,400 cans every hour and 6 minutes. It just doesn't scale well. So let's round that 22 frames down a bit more, give the Slurm Queen the benefit of the doubt, and say she can produce 1 can every 20 frames. That's 3 cans every 2 seconds. That's 90 cans per minute. That's 5,400 cans per hour, which means we're still well within the ballpark of the actual average we calculated, just 6 minutes faster per hour. For argument's sake, let's assume the Slurm Queen literally never stops production. Assuming all that, a single Slurm Queen could produce 129,600 cans of Slurm per 24-hour period. Over the course of a year, that's 47,304,000 cans. Now, 47 million seems like a big number. If you haven't been to the part of the Coca-Cola website that says they sell 1.9 billion servings per day. Now, that is all of their drinks, not just Coke, and to be fair, I don't know how they're measuring a serving to boost up those numbers. However, literally none of that matters at the scale we're talking about here. If we call a serving 8 ounces, that's 1.267 billion 12-ounce cans per day. Now, if I'm being absurdly generous, 1% is 12.67 million. At that rate, it would take less than 4 days to go through an entire year's worth of product from a single Slurm Queen. It is simply not possible for one queen to keep up with this demand. It would take about 98 of them for 1% of the Coca-Cola company's global output. Slurm is an intergalactic brand. They would need thousands, if not tens of thousands of queens capable of producing the same quality Slurm. The previously mentioned Royal Slurm vat contraption in a torture cave protected by
Grunka-lunka-dunkety-darm guards
is clearly the way they do this. But this does come with an additional implication. If Leela's commoner ancestry spoils her Slurm, that suggests that members of royal families have some sort of inherent quality that makes them special, or some divine right bullshit like that. Now personally, I am firmly pro-regicide, with the exception of Martin Luther King Jr., maybe Aragorn, and
Super King, the best one of the 3.
But outside of fiction, the very idea of noble descent is absurd, and I'm not going to explain to you why kings don't have special blood. But what I can do is meet a piece of fiction where it's at and pretend there is some sort of special quality to royalty, especially if that fiction includes turning those monarchs into worms, which does appear to be an important part of making Slurm. But this is what I was getting at the beginning when I was saying there was no contemporary comparison for Slurm. I've had Surge and I've had Coke, and maybe they're close, but it seems too simple for this bizarre alien honey from royal lineage. But if I made a whole ass 20-minute video about the taste of Slurm and didn't taste anything by the end of it, I think people would be mad and I'd feel a little dishonest. Unfortunately, I didn't really come to a conclusion on what that taste even really is. So instead, I just put together a bunch of the shit that we talked about in the video earlier. I've got this concentrated Mountain Dew syrup that's kind of like concentrated Slurm, maybe, I don't know. Honey, like bees make. I got this blueberry soda that might be Wumpus berry flavored-ish. I don't know, it's not very good. And then, you know, Coca-Cola. Why not? It doesn't look like it, but let's try it. Oh, fuck. Oh my god, it's so fucking sweet. That is foul. Foul. Guillermo was right. You gotta get some blood of the royals in there or something. If anybody knows how to facilitate that, let me know. Just not that Andrew guy. I hear he's more of a fig wasp these days.
The use of words expressing something other than their literal intention. Now that is irony.
Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.